Okay, I'm just gonna press record. I'll edit all this later on. Good afternoon to all the fathers out there and all the men out there. We want to say welcome to the Father Talk Show. We have got a packed full talk today. We have a special guest. I'm not going to really say who it is at the moment, but to change it. I'm not going to say who it is at the moment, but he's got some amazing and wonderful information to come and share with you about dads in business. So, which is awesome. My name is Margaret Thorli. I'm the CEO of Hope and Restoration, which is a non-profitable organization. And we support single fathers to become the best version of who they are. And I salute you, single fathers, and all the men out there for the most amazing work that you are doing. Without no further ado, I'm going to introduce my host, my king, Daniel.
Thank you so much, Margaret. Absolute pleasure to be here as always. And yeah, always very much look forward to doing these podcasts with you. And we have a number of very sort of varied guests, don't we? And so how's your week been, Margaret?
My week's been fantastic. Busy with the events that's coming up, which I'm super excited about. And I will tell you that later, but it's been amazing and wonderful.
Good, good, good. So we're going to introduce our guest speaker today. His name is Lee Eldridge. He's a performance coach who has worked in elite sports and business for over 15 years. He delivers coaches to SMEs and global companies across the world. And he has spent the last 3 years supporting and researching into business dads in their thinking and approach to life, which is absolutely what we need. This started with what he calls his daddy moment in November 2021, and we're looking forward to hearing about that. And Lee is passionate about helping people achieve sustainable high performance, which is what we love, which is what so many of us want to do. So Lee, welcome to the show, and absolutely delighted to have you on board.
Cheers, guys. Thank you for the warm introduction.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit more about yourself and who you are.
Yeah, so I started kind of my coaching journey around the age of 17 when all my friends were going out and doing bits and pieces and getting part-time jobs. And a friend of mine said, "Oh, why don't you come and learn how to be a swimming teacher?" I'm quite a reasonable swimmer. So I was like, yep. So I spent a weekend doing that and then kind of got into coaching. And my first real experience was when a young boy had gone on holiday to Spain, fell in the swimming pool, nearly drowned, lost all his confidence in his water. So then his mum brought him to swimming to say, look, we're going to go on holidays, in the summer, and we're really worried about his fear. And then kind of took him from that journey to get him from being very scared to being able to swim again and have confidence in the water. And I was immediately hooked in terms of taking somebody from not believing that they could ever do anything to seeing them slowly, step by step progress and them achieving something. And they look back and think, where were you at the start of this? And that kind of drove me into, sports science, learning about human performance, masters in human performance. And then I kind of broke into, after some effort, into professional sports and started working with elite athletes in the area of physical preparation predominantly. And then around 2016, I was heading out to Geneva to work for a performance company, and they asked me to go across into their corporate side. So we started drawing across all our learnings from human performance around a holistic approach. So looking at the person as a whole, not just as separate parts. And that's kind of led on to where I am now, where I'm more involved, I would say, on a corporate level and much less on a kind of professional sports level.
Yeah, I think that holistic approach is what's really needed, and there's too little of that, not just in our field, but in medicine. It's yeah. So that sounds like it was a good path to take for you.
Yeah,
No, that's a fantastic part to take. to start with and to take too. It's brilliant. Now, guys, I'm just going to read something that I did a search. And actually, Lee, you wrote something on LinkedIn where you talked about guilt with fathers. Can you just elaborate on that? Because I read it and it kind of like hit me on the chest. I know what you're saying. Could you just elaborate that onto our viewers out there? What did you mean by that?
Yeah. So how it came back is when I first started really getting into kind of supporting business dads, there wasn't much research out there in terms of what was going on. So I was like, right, I know, kind of put my sports science head, let's do a bit of a needs analysis, let's find out about what is actually happening. So that's kind of driven me to interview lots of dads and research it. And guilt was always kind of an emotion that was always discussed. So either there's that feeling of guilt that when they're in the business, they're not spending enough time with their children. And when they're spending time with their children or their family, there's this guilt feeling that they're not being able to push their business forward as much as they'd like to. So they're really in a tough situation where it doesn't matter where they're at, there's always this kind of feeling of guilt and stuff. And that really kind of drove me to think more about this idea of guilt as a dad, basically.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because my first question then is, how would you reconcile those two? Because they seem on the surface to clash. So yeah, I'm asking for your bit of coaching expertise here.
So the first one is that if we talk about elite performance, and when we're talking about that, let's just say professional sports, for example, we know that for you to be able to perform to your best, you really need to be thinking on one thing at one time. So there has to be this element of, okay, that guilt pulls you out of that ability to be able to focus on one thing at one time, which is detrimental to the one thing that you are doing. So everyone talks about this idea of being present, which is great, but I talk a lot more about engagement and trying to be engaged in what you are actually doing. So if you are with your child or with your son, daughter, whatever it might be, you're actually engaged in what they are doing, and you end up getting kind of lost in their life when they're playing, which will ultimately kind of reduce the chances of you getting distracted, getting pulled more back into that business mindset. So it's really a shift to understand that actually by focusing on one thing, you're able to perform better at the other thing when you come back round to it.
So like a single-minded focus, and like you said, being in the moment with whatever you're doing.
Yeah. There's lots of stuff about flow psychology and, that optimal or peak performance state that we're all kind of searching for. And then when we actually get into it, it feels amazing. It kind of lights us up. It drives us. It improves our performance. It allows us to do many, many more beneficial things. The challenge comes from that is as soon as we start to think about something else, it pulls us out of that state. And that's where the majority of the challenges that I work with now from a business level is that people are just trying to do too many things at once. They're just it's so easy to be distracted. It's very hard to get deep, concentrated work nowadays, but there's huge benefits in terms of setting up your day to enable you to do that.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think that follows really nicely to this question. I mean, that's part of the challenge is as you're working with dads in business, what are the unique challenges that they face as single dads? I mean, you've already touched a bit of that already. What are the unique challenges that they probably faced?
So
as you support dads?
In terms of the research, the big three areas, and there's some that are cross, they're not unique to everyone, but time is the biggest issue that most people, I just don't feel I've got enough time. We touched on engagement there, but the big one that really I come across was how they define success and how that is quite unique to, i.e. being a business dad, but being a single dad as well. And what success actually looks like for them. And there was a real kind of huge, I would say, variation in what people were saying. So some dads were very clear in terms of what their business success looked like, what we want to be doing from a profit point of view, employment point of view, markets, industry, how that ever looked. But then when I said, well, what does success look like from a dad point of view? That's where it kind of got a bit muddied water. There wasn't a clear kind of like, right, this is what I want to be like, or this is what I want to as a parent, basically. And I think that
Mhm.
that is a area that's from a not necessarily, I wouldn't say a stigma point of view, but this idea of wanting to be a great dad and
Mhm.
but then also trying to be a great business person gets a bit lost. And I feel that's probably the unique challenge. I think I see it that it's okay, not necessarily it's okay, but it seems to be right. The dad goes off and does the business thing, and then he's a pickup dad when he wants to be. If he wants to be more of a dad, and you know, it's kind of the flip reverse from a mother's point of view, where most people are like, right, be the mum, be the mum, be the mum. Oh, but you also want a job. What's going on here that gets a bit lost? So I think that's the unique challenge, is that it's the opposite way around.
So it seems again like it's a bit more of a holistic approach. So when you think about success, you're thinking about the holistic approach. So not just the business, but the father, the personal stuff, and it's all intertwined with together to give that overall success,
Yeah.
not just solely focused on business, right?
So, and it all stems from the myth of work-life balance. Everyone's like, oh, work-life balance, it's everywhere. Talk about people's well-being, performance, et cetera, et cetera. And I think to myself, with work-life balance, there's a couple. One, it's really hard to get if you want to be very good in any area. But two,
Mhm.
you have it, but realistically, how long do you actually have this balance for? Your child gets sick, something happens at business, and then it just swings. So for me, the way that I would talk about is that kind of work comes into life. We all, in
Mhm.
theory, spend a lot of time working. We all, in theory, want to get something out of it. So it's actually a part of our life, and it's just part of our holistic kind of overall thing. So, I've worked in Switzerland, and Switzerland has one of the highest suicide rates for senior leaders in the world. And the reason for that is, or I believe the reason for that is that you've got somebody who invest so much time into being a leader, business, work, whatever, then something goes wrong, that gets taken away from them, and they've had no time or energy to maintain a relationship with their partner, with their wife, whatever that looks like. And their children probably don't ever see them and don't know them. And then they're like, and then all my friends are associated with my title or my job, and they're like, I've got nothing. So what we're trying to say there is that we need to make sure that we spend time in all those areas. We know
Mhm.
that sometimes less time might happen, but at some point we need to kind of shift the needle, basically.
Mhm. That's a really good way to put it, that shifting the needle, because sometimes we get stuck on focusing on one thing, and maybe we neglect we're trying to grow the business, we neglect the family, we neglect the children. And when time now comes in, it becomes very, very difficult for them. I love what you've just said. Now, what are you currently working on right now with
Um,
dads?
yeah, so two areas is one is just the kind of coaching and the research that goes through that is to try to push out more or get more dads to kind of come to me and open up, because it's been really difficult to because I the outreach is I try to connect, and nine times out of people say, look, I'm just too busy at the moment. And I'm like, they're the people that I'd like to really get all the kind of evidence and research from. They're the people that I really need to speak to. And then the second point is that from a group coaching point of view or a group discussion point of view, men's mental well-being, the biggest reason for male deaths under the age of 50 is suicide. There's huge areas that I just don't think that men are very good at talking. And, the evidence of group talking is really powerful. So that's where I'm trying to create a safe space, is something that's probably not kind of associated, but definitely an area where we can all share in, very similar to this, like, right, this is what I'm going through. And lots of people are like, wow, okay, I'm going through something similar.
Mm-hmm.
Men notoriously are very good at being like, right, no, if everything goes wrong, it's on me. It's on me. I've got to clamp down. I've got to kind of, have this huge emotional regulation, not show any emotion. And I understand that from both a business point of view and both, as a parent's point of view, that if things are going wrong, people will look towards you. They don't want you to be the one flapping around, shouting, screaming, showing emotion. But at some point, we need to be able to discuss what happened, release that emotion. And that's what we don't do very well. When we store it, and then it comes out and we don't have any control over when that happens.
It's funny when you said at the beginning of that none of the people that you speak to have time. It reminded me of that famous Zen saying, which is, you should meditate 30 minutes a day unless you're really busy, in which case you should meditate an hour a day. And it's the same with coaching, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. You're trying to kind of, we all understand that from a business, let's put our business heads on, that we're trying to kind of get to know people's challenges and problems, but it's sometimes difficult that for men, I think, to realize that actually I'm struggling here, or I'm looking for, to do it. And if it's not business orientated, if it's not packaged in a very high performance elite way, people are just like, nah, we don't think we need that help.
I think also, with men, they tend to attach more of their identity strength to what they're doing with work, whereas women, it's the families that they have. Their identity is attached to the family as they are as a mother. But with men, it's usually with work, isn't it? So what does that literally bring about you, that dynamic, that what you see? Is it like men need to step out of that identity attachment, or what do you feel?
Yeah, so I think that, we have us, we have I, and then obviously we have these roles or identities that we kind of shift in through. We still have a core, I'd say, kind of values and purpose in each, that's us. We can't change who we are. But one way that I try to look at it is that there's lots and lots of research around the benefits of dads being heavily involved with their children. And when I kind of speak to them in terms of improved cognitive performance at school, improved emotional regulation, reduction in stress, more chances of attending school later on at life, which obviously helps in terms of that. Once we start to say, actually, you being around and you being there has a huge benefit for your child, there's a shift to think where it's not just me business wise and mum takes care of the kids. And we're saying, look, this is not just a nicety, a daddy daycare occasionally scenario. This is when you kind of invest massively into your child's development. Mm-hmm. And that's not to say mums aren't doing a fantastic job. It's just that obviously the research has been around dads, because majority of the time dads aren't there to a certain degree. So that's where the research has been driven in those areas, because this is what's driving, this idea of shared parental leave, and that we can start to, not just have this idea of, right, we've got 2 weeks, that's it, done, back to work. It's like, right, we can start to share, we can develop our child from a young age, knowing that dad's around.
It's a really fantastic one. I just want to go a little bit what you said in terms of getting the fathers to come together, or getting the men to come together. It is really, really difficult to do so. Because I experienced that we had, in terms of creating a safe space for them, we had a program which was only for men, which was a business startup workshop for men. And I faced that challenge as well, just getting the men. I mean, normally, if I was recruiting women, I only need 1 month. The class is full. But for the men, honestly, it was 3 months. It took me 3 months to get the men, but I managed to recruit at least 30 men. but we kind of break it in segments. So for example, we will have 12 in a group. So everybody, and one thing I learned when we did that, in the safe space, when they felt they were safe, and also another thing, when they felt they trusted me, because I needed to earn their trust, I needed to earn their respect and everything. Oh my God, they opened up. They literally opened up, because the other guy that came and support me as well, I made sure he was a guy. So I was the only woman there. And I saw the turnaround was amazing. And I saw the men speaking out all the challenges they were going. And I saw them, there was for example, there was a guy who was going for the first time to court to do custody, custody battle. And one of the guy, he was really nervous and he opened up in the group how he truly felt. And it was so moving and so inspiring. When the guy stood up and said, bro, I'll go with you. Tell me the date, where it is, and I'll be there. And I actually sat down and I'm like, wow. And you are right. So, if we can get that space for them and created it and they can trust us, they will definitely get there. So you're doing an amazing job, to be able to create that space for those men. But I hear what you're saying. It is a bit challenging getting them. So hopefully, if there's any guys that's out there listening, do contact Lee. We will be putting Lee's information, how you can contact him, towards the end of this video. Now, our next question is, what is the Thriving Business Dad Project does?
Yeah, so what you've just touched on there is that we're trying to get a group of men together to work, to kind of lean on each other, support each other, guide them through a process that is back through evidence, back through science, to help them and support them in different ways. And as you touched on before, that a lot of the again, maybe a male stereotypical view is that, it's me on my own, my challenge is unique, my problem is unique. And actually maybe, but everyone has similar things. There's always, the big three things in life. Everyone's busy, everyone's got problems, but everyone's trying to do the best with what they've got. And that's where this project is kind of growing, and we're trying to develop it and to bring in different ways and different ideas in terms of, like, what does it look like? Okay, yeah, it might be an online kind of discussion, but is there an opportunity for us to meet up, go for a walk, or is there an opportunity to go play some sports? I find that men attach ourselves to that kind of element in terms of doing it more. They're better at doing things and talking than just sitting around and just kind of twiddling their thumbs. They want to be active, and there's huge science out there about the benefits of being active and being able to share and stuff like that.
Yeah. That's fantastic.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the things I was going to ask you actually is, I remember when I was running my business, I noticed that the better I was as an employer, the better my parenting skills were, and vice versa. And I felt the qualities I needed to be a good parent made me into a good employer, and I treated my staff well. And what has been your experience with that aspect? Have you found that the great bosses, the good bosses, have been better parents, and vice versa, and you could use one to train the other, and vice versa? It's like, because I remember hearing someone say, all I learned about being a good boss, I learned from my son and daughter.
Yeah, I touched on the research of the benefit of the child, but there's massive benefits from your leadership. So one is that other people that work for you or in your team will have children. So there's automatically an empathy issue, that you understand that, when they leave the office or they close their computer, whatever, there are challenges at home that we're all going through, so lack of sleep, arguments, trying to get kids ready for the school. We're all kind of going through this hubba-bubba of what's going on. So to have some appreciation that when people come into the office, how do we get them to, right, just switch focus and just switch on? That's a great thing. Second of all is that understanding that, I've got two children. They are very, very different. They are, you apply different kind of parenting skills to each of them, and that's where this idea of understanding the individual in the team scenario really kind of hits you, that right, okay, yeah, they are employed by us, they are a title, they do this role, but there's so much more behind them that can help. And I think they're the real big couple of things where you've seen that the business dads I've spoke to that have large teams have a sense of kind of not necessarily control, but they just seem to be way more calm about lots of different situations. And I think that is a huge power and a huge benefit of it.
So they have like this inner authority, so to speak, where they are confident in themselves. Are they the same way as parents though? That's the thing.
That's behind closed doors, we never know. But there's lots of stuff coming around, the benefits from a leadership point of view in terms of authenticity, vulnerability, all these areas. So the dads that were very good leaders were very active and saying, I do share the challenges that I have, and I'm comfortable to share around the table when they feel applicable and at a level that they know how far to share things. I think that's good. And the other thing is that we kind of misrepresent that the business dads that are still in relationships, that still have marriages, being a great parent will support your marriage, and you kind of come together as a unity and as a power. And I think if you're a single dad, that's exactly the same in terms of the relationships you're in and how that looks. I think that's kind of a very powerful thing as well.
What would you say are the unique challenges that single dads would face together with running a business then? It's like, because we're mainly about this show about, giving support to single fathers. So what would you say are the...
Yeah, so I work with a couple of single dads, and I think the challenge that they would face is it's slightly easier to really give yourself to the business, because you are not necessarily spending as much time with your children, depending on what your custody looks like. So it's quite easy to give, 16, 18 hours to that business. And yeah, there's some guys that I know that are just, they don't, and their pure focus is on that one thing. And that's, I see it, I understand it. But as I spoke to you before, when we're talking about performance and sustainable performance, which is the biggest thing, high performance is, for me, yeah, it's great, but to be able to sustain it over long periods of time, because we're here for a long time in theory, it's not a year project, it's a long-term kind of thing. So it's to try to get them to have a bit, kind of blue sky thinking, to step back and think, right, can I sustain this for another 6 months, et cetera, because burnout is on the increase. There's a prevalence of burnout, and realistically, if you are burnt out, you're useless to anyone. You're useless in your business. You're useless to your kids. You're useless to any kind of relationship out. And then we're like, right, okay, well, how long does it take you to get back to where you want to be? And then I would say that's a challenge, that you can just go too deep into one thing.
And the question is, are they doing that to avoid their emotions?
That's probably a question that the more you spend, the more you either coach them or talk to them, you start to see that you would start to see, okay. Right, okay, yeah. And it's no different that to sometimes how what we would perceive as positive things actually becoming quite negative from an addictive point of view. And I think the big one that physical activity is great. It's amazing. We need physical activity, but I know loads of business dads and single dads that use physical activity as an escape to push themselves so hard so that they can't think of anything else. There's great work by Gabor Mate about self-harming people. They do it so because it's that one moment that they can feel something and that's where they get it from that perspective. So I can see how what we might deem as being positive, you're working hard on your business, you're growing your business, you're scaling. Well, that's great, but why are you doing it? Are you and that all comes back to that, probably that biggest thing is like, right, what do you define as your success? And getting clear
Yes.
on that. And then, right, what do I need to get there? And along the way, is there too many sacrifices, or am I going to hurt myself or others around me?
Yeah, that is a really good point that you have just literally brought up as well, because I can actually identify that as well when you're running your own business and you're a single parent. And I've seen that when I'm coaching single fathers and everything. And there's most time what I do with them, I have to actually sit them. That is a brilliant point because they lead into maybe burnout, or they're running away from their emotions, running away from the challenges they're taking out and focusing it all at work or running the business. What I normally do as I'm coaching or going through the process with them is actually do a program, written program, step by step, so they can claim back that part of them as well, and to be able to focus their life and have that work balance life with the business. Because I gone through it where I was burnt out because I'm thinking, oh my God, I've got to bring the money in, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. So I can identify that. And so normally what I do, I'll say, okay, let's look at where you are. What's happening there? Okay, let's do the school runs. How does that impact you? How does it affect you? Because we're taxi drivers for our children. You pick up, you drop, you go, you come back, you go
But
to.
you have teenagers.
All those things there. And you know what? That just gave them a really clear picture how to balance their business as well as running the family home. But there's a great thing there. But I just want to bring this to you guys out there. This is something I find out. I was doing the research as you were coming, and they were saying, I'm not sure, Lee, what you think about this, that's business out there, single fathers and dads that run business, is one of the biggest market that has been ignored. What do you think? I was shocked when I read that.
I see a business opportunity. I'm sure there must be companies that are focusing on single dads. And if not, there's some potential there for anyone that really wants to go into that.
Definitely. What do you think? What's your take on that? When I read that, wow, because, yeah.
Look, I think just in general, I see that, how do I put it? It seems to be a little bit more of a challenge, a little bit harder in certain areas to get men's kind of groups up and running, and I see, and this again, there's no disrespect, women's, there's always kind of women's in business groups everywhere you go, and there rightly should be. And this is where, I've walked into events and people have turned around to me and they said, look, don't talk about your business dad thing because it just doesn't come across as very inclusive, basically. And for me, it's like, well, we can't have diversity without inclusivity. It just, they seem to be separated, but actually they're hugely kind of yin and yang of each other.
Yeah.
And I see it that there is a lack in big companies and a bit of apprehension to say, right, we've got a men's group or we've got a dad's group, because everyone's like, that doesn't seem to be very inclusive. We can't not let women into a certain group, but then it's like, well, but we can stop men coming in. So I can see where you're going, and where the research is pointing that is that it's probably not seen as a profitable market, even though we all understand there's thousands of business dads out there. There's thousands of single business dads out there. So there is, as Daniel rightly put, a unique business opportunity.
Yeah.
Most definitely. Because I've experienced that when I started the Father Talk Show, and then when I started recruiting the men to come into the workshops that we're running, business startup, and I literally got the women coming to me and saying to me, "So what? Haven't you got anything for women? Why everything is just for the fathers? You're talking about fathers." And this woman coming at me, and I'm thinking, well, why not? So I suppose we need to change that kind of view altogether that's out there, that negative connotation that's out there about men as well.
Do you know what
What do you think?
I think there's so much negative stories about men, and in general it feels like there could be a gender against men for some reason, when they speak about the man being stupid and all this in films. And I didn't watch that film Barbie, but a lot of people were saying it had a very negative portrayal of men. I'm not sure about that. I've never seen it, but in general, for some reason, men are seen as in a negative way. And I think, starting up groups that support men is very positive, because the men are starting to wake up to this and say, no, we don't, we're good. We provide, we do a lot of very useful things and help society in many different ways. And I think, to focus. And I mean, I think we're all one, really, men and women. There is no real sense of separation, but we define in separation. That does create division. But ultimately, I think, men do need to be supported. And what you're doing with the business dads thing is absolutely need to be done. Otherwise, why would you be doing it?
Yeah, I think there's two things there. You're right. And during an interview, a dad pulled up on this. He said, if you look at dads in cartoons, what do they come across as? And he mentioned Peppa Pig. The dad is notoriously bumbling buffoon, basically, and makes mistakes. Homer Simpson's a classic one of just, making mistakes. And then if you move into a comedic, like, Motherland is a great, hilarious kind of Netflix sitcom where it's parents, but there is a guy who is a stay-at-home dad, and he always comes across as if he's forgetting things and and things are going wrong, and there's all bits and pieces there. And I just think to myself that does, we accept it, and I'm not to say that there shouldn't be, but then he moved across to Bluey, which is an Australian kind of thing, and the dad is very much kind of involved with his kids, playing with his kids, taking them there, here, and everywhere. And I was on a panel the other week, and they were talking about shared parental leave. And to be fair, a lot of people kind of fed back that, if they were a dad and they were kind of taking over and then taking their child to baby groups, etc., there would be some apprehension of walking in the room, because it's majority of mums in there, and there's a kind of a look to say, well, what's going on here? And kind of a negative thing about where's the mum, and that's the big thing, I think.
But is that because of this agenda that there's been that portrays dads in a negative light, or that men in a negative light? That's the point. Yeah. And I think a lot of times then when we see these bumbling dads, these dads that look idiotic, that I'm sure if you're a woman and you're constantly subjected to that, you end up seeing men in a negative light.
Yeah. And, obviously, as we understand that if there have been negative things by a male, that gets highlighted in the media. And, a prime example, I suppose, is, from in the sporting background, obviously, I don't know the legal ramp, but the things with Red Bull and Chris Horner, and it all gets kind of pulled out. But there are both men and both women around the world doing amazing, positive things that we just don't get to. It just doesn't get pulled out. I don't know. It seems as if from a female's point of view, we highlight if women that had, they seem to be doing everything. They're a great mum, they're a great business leader, but we don't highlight dads or single dads that are doing fantastic things. There's no platform for them. And if there was, people being like, oh, well, you've kind of had your time. It's now diversity and inclusivity time.
Would you say then in that case, as I'm hearing you guys talking, that the media has played a massive part to kind of demonize the men as it is? Would you say so? And I can see you nodding, Daniel.
To be honest with you, it certainly seems that way. It certainly seems there could be an agenda. There is an agenda. Just by the way a lot of women speak about men. But it's, you cannot be certain for sure. There needs to be a lot more research about this, but judging by the way many women speak about men, it feels like there is some sort of negative agenda. Now, I could be wrong, mistaken about that, but yeah. What do you think, Lee?
What do you think, Lee? Because one of the things you mentioned, which is Homer Simpson, I mean, that is a classic one, the way it comes. What do you think? Do you think the media has played a big part, and also putting kind of, now actually when you mention Homer Simpson, I watched it, I used to, and I'll just laugh, but I didn't look at the deep message that has been coming out of it. What do you think?
I don't know whether it is a negative agenda, but it's probably just an agenda that's happened. It's just for years gone past, and it's a safe agenda to pull out, basically. This whole idea of male toxic masculinity, etc. It's just people are interested in it from a, and it obviously portrays men in a negative light. It's not, it's not that I just don't think there's enough positive things being put out there to kind of counteract maybe what is deemed as negative, and actually those negative things are not seen as negative. It's just seen as, well, yeah, it's the man's fault, basically.
Oh, wow. And I'm glad that's what you're doing, such an amazing work with the dads out there and men. Now I've got a question, something it says here. I'm trying to get interviews with business dads for my book and potential clients. Can you tell us more about that, please?
Yeah, so as I touched on before, that the kind of, from a sports science point of view, what we would do is whenever we entered into a new sport, we would say, right, look, this is what really good performance looks like. This is what the research says. Then we look at the athlete and be like, right, where's the gap analysis? So it's like, right, okay, what does good look like? And then, there wasn't any research out there around business dads. So I'm always keen to speak to both single business dads and business dads around what they're doing to kind of understand, right, are there challenges, the big challenges that we see? How are they doing things differently? What's it going through from that perspective, and how that looks from it? And again, the more conversations that I have with dads, the better I become as a dad, because I'm like, wow, okay, yeah, they've got it down pat. That's a great idea. And then also just from a coaching point of view, it's great to kind of learn, right, actually from my set, these are the skills that I might need to go off and learn and think about, basically.
Right. So how can we, the Father Talk Show, be able to support you?
This is great, to be able to kind of sit down and talk to you two who've got experience of, working with dads or being a dad, and just to get the message out there that I think there are opportunities. I think that if we look back, and a friend of mine were talking about this, that the campfire scenario in a tribal kind of culture, if you think about it, was very, men used to sit around and talk, and now obviously that's gone by the wayside, but we just don't do that. very well. And if we do talk, you
We're
know,
not allowed to make campfires.
no, yeah, exactly. So, so what I mean by that is that, you know, when do we talk? Well, when we're either playing sport or we're down the pub or we're watching sport, or they're the stereotypical kind of scenarios. But
Mhm.
I don't know any of my friends, you know, and I know some of them have struggled, but I've never known any of them ever turn around to me and say, "Oh, on a Wednesday night, I go to a men's group or a chat group." There seems to be this stigma that actually you're weak, you're infallible, you're not a strong male if you need to be able to talk and trying to help. And what I would say, one thing is that going to a group is not about you; it's
Mm.
about the others in the group. And you sharing your problem actually helps the group way more than your problem, because everyone sits there and think, wow, I've been through that. I know it, like with the guy you just said, you know, I'm there for you if you need me. And
Mhm.
sometimes, and you must come across it with the dads you work with, is that lots of people's friends don't get what you're doing. They don't get why you're trying to start a business. You know, lots of my friends have been like, just quit, just go get a job. And you're like, no, I don't want to go get a job. That's not what I'm here for. I'm here to make a difference. I'm here to kind of get it out there, basically.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, and you might
Thank you.
actually,
Well done. You're doing so fantastic.
yeah, I was
Go on,
going to say,
Danny.
when you first start your business, I remember when I first started my business, a lot of people said, don't do it. You know, it was like, no, 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 you should have a safe job. I mean, this was over 20 years ago. And yeah, it was like a lot of people were negative, and you have to go beyond that because, but in a way, it's good because it brings up your doubts so you can clear those doubts. And when you can clear those doubts, then all of a sudden you're even more determined to make it a success.
Yeah. And there's a guy who, Mark Manson, who wrote the book of The Subtle Art of Not Giving a, which is a great book if you've seen it. And he really got good
Mhm.
newsletter, and he wrote the fact that your biggest critics will be the people that love you the most.
Yes. Yes, I agree with that statement.
You know, your
I
friends and
agree.
family will be the ones that will be your, you know, they will be the most vocal about when things go wrong, and they'll be the quick ones to be like, look, yeah, it's okay to stop, go get a job. And it's like, well, no. And that's where, again, the group, you know, being in and around other business dads that are going through the same things, that, you know, you can say, well, I'm struggling here. And most of them will say, don't quit, just keep showing up, keep going. How can we help? How can we support each other? And then there's a ceiling that you just hit through, and then things start to change and develop and adapt.
Yeah.
So, no, that is really great.
I'm tempted to ask both of you or all of us maybe, what's our best business book? So, you know, out of all the books that we've read on business, what's the best one? Margaret, do you have one at all that you've
Yeah,
read?
there's one book, sure about business, but more towards the financial side of it when I was starting my business, because I find that was it's what was it? The Mind of a Millionaire. All
The Millionaire
right, that
Mind.
one. Yeah, and the other one that I read? Oh my God, I forgot it. But it challenged my mindset in terms of to come up at a higher level, how I budget and manage my own personal finance, as well as to manage the business finance as it is coming in. So that book really challenged me. I just don't remember the name, but I've got it up there. But I know that was one of the greatest book that I read because it challenged my financial side of it. Yes.
What about you, Lee?
I think there's probably two classics. There's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is
Yeah.
yeah.
It's the one I couldn't think of.
That's
Yes,
what
that
got
was
me
it.
to
Yeah.
start my business, actually. My first business, that's the first that I read that, I started my business.
And I think, you
Yeah.
know, there are some, and the title kind of, I suppose, dilutes how good it is for just anybody to read it from a financial point of view to understand that. And then
Mhm.
probably the book that my old boss, you know, Stephen Covey's 7 Factors of Highly Effective People, which I kind of come back to regularly because we can't separate the human and the business. It just doesn't work. If you want to be a leader, then you've got to be able to have those seven habits nailed down. I always think of kind of, think win-win, and that's one of the biggest habits that we talk about, and there's too many times in business, it's always this win-lose scenario, win-lose, win-lose. And it's like, no, we can win-win. And this is where, again, I think that the conversation around having a men's group in big companies, business dads, but is a win-win scenario, basically.
No, most definitely. Yes. Another
Yours,
thing I'm
Daniel,
just
you
gonna
didn't mention what yours was.
yes.
So you know what? I've like yourself, I've read a lot of business books, but my absolute favorite that I've given to a lot of my friends is Maverick. And this was basically when I started my first business, I researched the best run companies in the UK and then in the world. And I came across this company called Semco in Brazil. And this company was started can't even remember what it did, but it gave so much freedom and openness and transparency. If you're a worker, if your boss didn't perform, you could sack your own boss. You could choose how much you wanted to earn in your job. There was no secretaries. You could choose when you wanted to come to work. It was so much flexibility and freedom. And this was, and when I read it, I thought, oh my God, all businesses should be run like this. And
Wow.
this was in the 1980s.
But
yeah, I would it's called Maverick by Ricardo Semler, and for me it's one of the best business books ever written.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you. Let me just share some really good statistics in terms of actually a single dad boss, all right? There are a lot better bosses. What do you think about that? Or dads are better bosses than anyone's out there. And one of the reasons they've put that down, they said 32% they offer, like dads, okay, single dads and dads, they offer additional holidays to the staff versus the average, okay? And then 30% offer flexible work arrangement versus the average of 27%. And there is 18% more dads willing to share jobs than there is the normal. What do you think about that? That is a fascinating figures. What do you think about that, Lee?
yeah, I think we touched on it earlier that being a dad, single dad, you have more empathy around the people around you. You're more willing to kind of allow that person the opportunity to spend more time with their family or pick up their kids from school, which, to touch on, is a really beneficial time that parents, oh my God, I've got to go pick up the kids, da, da, da. But in theory, one, you've got the kid in an enclosed environment. You can talk to them about it. They're the best times for me, picking my daughter up from school, just the download she gives me on her complete day. But I think more importantly, because you're driving, you can't be looking at your phone. You can't be sending emails. You have to listen to what your kid says, and you have to have these weird and wonderful conversations. So, of course, if your boss is a dad and he's like, right, yeah, go pick your kids up or do this or be more flexible, then yeah. And I think by doing that and empowering your employees to do that and giving that to your employees, you get it back 10 times in return. When things go wrong and you need people to step up, they're more willing and likely to do that. But if you've drained them and you've pulled them and you've pulled and worked them to the bone, they're like, nah, I'm not going to do this.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with that 100%. I think with regards to single dads in being general better bosses, is that what you said? Yeah.
Yes.
Do you know what the way I'm looking at it is when you grow your single father and you go through all the grieving process and you clear all that sadness, that grief, grief is always the gateway emotion to connection and oneness. So once you process all that grief, you feel more connected with not just, you know, your the old partner, you feel connected with everyone. And, you know, once you let out all of that from the divorce, then maybe that's one of the reasons, who knows?
They're the best, boss. Lee, speak to the audience out there regarding about, you know, people you want to interview, regarding about your book. Just tell them out there, you know, what you're doing. And I've looked at your LinkedIn page. You're doing some amazing work. You're doing some amazing. Tell them more about those things as well as we're coming to an end.
You know, it's a semi-structured interview that we're getting for research and how that looks in terms of dads, any business dads, you know, dads that are, you know, trying to lead companies, or, you know, they're founders or owners of companies. Ideally, their children are still at school. You know, I've interviewed a lot of dads who have their kids have left school, which is great for them to reflect and think, right, well, I could have done it differently. But I really want people that are in it and kind of trying to get through it as much as possible. They're the type of people that I love to kind of speak to and have discussions with, to ultimately learn from them and for them to share. Similarly, you know, from a group scenario, we've talked about it heavily about the benefits of sharing. You know, lots of business dads I interview, they're like, oh, it's great to be able to share these issues or challenges, because I can then say to them, yep, I've heard that before, or actually this is a great resource, or go read this book, or go see this person. And it helps to help, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So how could they contact you? Say there's a dad been listening right now and says, you know what, I really want to be part of this project. How could they contact you?
Yeah, so in terms of, you mentioned it, I'm kind of active on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's probably my main kind of go-to, and that's just Lee Eldridge. If you search me, you'll see that. Or they can drop me an email at lee@thrivingbusinessdads.com, which I'm sure you'll kind of share in the notes. And they're probably the best ways for people to reach out. And then we just set up a chat, and then we go from there, basically.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Maki, you got anything to add as we're coming to
I just
end?
want to say it's an absolute pleasure to speak with you, Lee, and thanks for answering all our questions. I hope none of them were too tricky, but yeah.
No, nothing, no big surprises for a Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, that's good.
It's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here and taking part on the Father Talk show. We really look forward to having you again. Perfect. You know, thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Lee. Thank you, Margaret, again, and thank you everyone for joining in. It's an absolute pleasure doing this every Saturday afternoon. So
yeah, so please, I want to say to all our viewers there, as we come to the end of this show, please press the like button and subscribe onto this channel, because we're going to be having some amazing speakers such as Lee, who come and share what he's doing. And please connect with him at Facebook. He's got some amazing articles out there that I was kind of reading and I was kind of laughing. So please go and he's got amazing videos as well, which I've listened to as well, which are very, very inspiring. So please do connect him on LinkedIn. And he's got tons of information on LinkedIn. I've read quite a few of them. So please connect with him. And we're definitely going to connect with the Father Talk show as well. But we thank you to all our viewers there as we come to an end. God bless. Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Thank you so much.